House Speaker Nancy Pelosi introduced a law that would operate under the 25th Amendment. It would create a congressional body with the power to determine whether or not a president is healthy enough to lead. One constitutional scholar says it's a good idea overall, but questions its timing. And he says he sees some constitutional violations in its details. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more.
Just 25 days to Election Day, a spotlight's on the 25th Amendment. Pelosi, alongside Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin, introduced legislation to create a 17-member panel that is allowed to make a judgment call on the president's health and fitness. A constitutional expert tells us the legislation should be enacted, but that a few of its details raise red flags.
They want to set up this other body than the cabinet to work with the vice president should the president become disabled. Congress can order this commission they're creating to give a medical exam to the president. That is a violation of his rights. It's a violation of rights of anybody. Congress has no authority to force anyone to take a medical examination.
Pelosi says it's to comfort the American people. Trump's virus diagnosis may have led them to ask themselves what would happen if Trump got too ill to perform and could not or would not appoint Vice President Mike Pence to take over.
This is not about President Trump. He will face the judgment of the voters.
But that's despite her earlier comments, hinting that Trump's medication to treat the virus may have taken a toll on his judgment. When pressed about the connection between her previous comments and her push for the new legislation, she denied the connection.
Well, let me first say, what I said about the president and the drugs was, there are those who believe that taking certain medications can affect your judgment. I don't know. Let's say what I actually said. I don't know.
The 25th Amendment was ratified 50 years ago to allow Congress to create such a congressional body.
You know, it's interesting that when I found that the body had never been set up, and I guess the reason is that there's never a really good time to do it because it's always seen just in its local circumstance as opposed to the need to have this institutionally.
Engel explains it isn't a bad plan, but the timing is questionable.
Now you have Congress, which can say, hey, we want to pass this legislation, we want to pass a resolution, we want the president's medical examination. This can be done over and over and over and over again. It doesn't transfer to Congress any real power, but it gives them another tool to harass a president they disagree with.
And he says if Biden is elected, it could lead to a situation where the cabinet could work alongside Kamala Harris to temporarily or permanently serve as acting president if the newly formed congressional body deems Biden mentally or physically unfit to serve. President Trump criticized the bill, writing in a tweet, "Crazy Nancy is the one who should be under observation." And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy echoed Trump's comments and says he's working with other Congress members to create a response. Reporting by Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
McCarthy also says he and other Congress members will try to craft something that calls into question Pelosi's mental capacity to be Speaker of the House. And Tennessee Congressman Mark Green is also working with McCarthy on Congress members' response. Green told American Thought Leaders host Jan Jekielek that he thinks it's yet another attempt by Pelosi to violate the separation of powers.
She wants to create some other non-constitutional layer to undo elections. I mean, Nancy Pelosi wants, I guess she just wants to be king of the United States. It's her way or the highway. And many of the bills and pieces of legislation they've passed all year has done nothing but concentrate power into the hands of fewer and fewer people, exactly opposite of what our founders intended. Socialism, all of it. I mean, they want a different country. They're trying to remake this nation into some, socialist utopian. And they hate Donald Trump. They'll do anything they can to prevent Donald Trump from ever happening, to include stacking the court. I don't know if this is, President Trump's capacity that they're talking about. They may be plotting to put Kamala Harris in the top spot. Who knows what her long game is? you'll just see each of us individually standing up for the Constitution of the United States.
A U.S. appeals court in Wisconsin has sided with Republican lawmakers, striking down a nearly week-long extension for counting absentee ballots in the upcoming election. This means that ballots arriving after November 3rd will now be disqualified. And U.S. postal investigators give caution after more mail, including voter ballots, is found discarded.
In a 2-1 ruling, the appeals court said Thursday that absentee ballots in the key battleground state will now be due by 8 p.m. on November 3rd. Their decision blocked an earlier ruling made by District Judge William Conley, which allowed Wisconsin officials to count ballots that arrive up to 6 days after the election. Conley said that the amount of absentee ballots cast could overwhelm election officials, since the amount is 3 times higher than any previous election. Democrats initially brought the lawsuit to Conley, requesting to loosen voting rules due to the pandemic. But the appeals court sided with Wisconsin Republican lawmakers who said the deadline change was too close to Election Day and wasn't constitutional. It argued voters have already had plenty of time to register and cast their ballot. The Wisconsin Elections Commission expects to count 2 million absentee ballots this election. In 2016, President Trump won Wisconsin by less than 1%, just 23,000 votes over then-presidential opposition Hillary Clinton. This year, Democrat and Republican groups have filed over 100 lawsuits nationwide over vote-by-mail rules. Most of the lawsuits have been backed by Democrats who say voting rules need to be relaxed to make voting more convenient during the pandemic. And in California, an investigation is underway after stolen mail from letterboxes that included voter ballots were found discarded. Though investigators believe the voter ballots were not specifically targeted, U.S. postal inspectors are recommending people retrieve their mail as soon as possible after it's delivered to protect their ballots.
A federal judge has denied a motion to extend Florida's voter registration deadline. On the final day of registration, Monday, the state's online system crashed. A coalition of voting rights groups filed a lawsuit calling for a 2-day extension, but Judge Mark Walker said extending the deadline could cause confusion. Florida's Secretary of State already extended the deadline to Tuesday evening. Judge Walker chastised the state for notifying the public late and not extending registration to midnight. The state said 50,000 people registered in that time, but 20,000 more could have registered if the system hadn't crashed. Jewish and Catholic institutions are suing New York's governor over his recent shutdown restrictions. They're accusing him of unfairly targeting places of worship while giving non-religious activities more wiggle room. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the suits.
Governor Cuomo's recent order put New Yorkers in some Brooklyn and Queens neighborhoods under lockdown, his response to a growing number of CCP virus cases in those areas. But the ban on what's considered non-essential gatherings and limits on religious groups got some pushback. The Brooklyn Diocese and the Agudath Israel of America are now suing the Democratic governor, accusing him of unfairly targeting religious activities by giving more wiggle room to non-religious activities. For one, they both point out that the governor's order puts no occupancy limit on businesses like grocery stores, but cuts off houses of worship to no more than 25 people at a time and non-essential gatherings to 10 people. The governor's order doesn't lay out what a non-essential gathering is. Cuomo says the issue, the virus cluster, does lie in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, which he has singled out in press conferences for having mass gatherings.
This is not a matter of religious freedom, right? I don't care if you're Roman Catholic, you're Jewish, you're Muslim, you're an atheist. You have to follow the rules of the state, the laws of the state.
In a statement, Cuomo's senior advisor said they've been sued virtually every day for every action taken and that they're focused on saving lives. According to city data, the number of daily virus cases reached a new high this week, nearly 700 cases, a number the city hasn't seen since late May. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
The review service Yelp is launching a new label that will be put on businesses accused of racism. The company said it will alert consumers when there is evidence of a business owner or employee engaging in racist actions. Our reporter Kevin Hogan has more on the company's new label.
Yelp is now warning consumers about businesses that engage in what it calls egregious and racially charged actions. The company will flag businesses with a public attention alert if someone associated with the business has been accused of racist behavior. Yelp said it will escalate the severity of the alert if there is resounding evidence of racist actions, and it will post a link to a so-called credible media source to back up the claim. Candidate for U.S. Senate Lauren Witzke makes the case that this will empower the mob to attack the flagged businesses.
It's absolute economic terrorism, and it makes these establishments targets for looting and rioting, like Black Lives Matter. That badge is a target. It is a bullseye for these rioters and looters to attack, and now they're giving them an excuse to go and attack them.
Black Lives Matter did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Yelp said the alert flag is a response to a rise in social activism surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement. Witzke says companies that are truly engaging in racism need to be called out, but that there must be a way to evaluate allegations.
Blackmailing. It is allowing baseless blackmailing from radical leftists to target conservatives, to target small businesses, and have people canceled, have their establishments canceled, and to make them targets.
Witzke says she opposes racism in all forms, but she says Yelp should not base their decision on what complaints are circulating on the internet. Lawyer Ron Coleman says Yelp has the legal right to offer its opinions, but it may be held liable if they publish content that defames a company. He also said there are no laws pertaining to this yet. A few New Yorkers offer their points of view on Yelp's alerts.
It's not fair to prejudge somebody and call them racist just based off your particular experience, especially when you don't have all the details.
I would say it's probably a bad idea. It can be weaponized, I think that, businesses have enough time staying in business, especially nowadays. And
news headlines is not always the right information. It's not always the right information. They give you what they want you to have.
Yelp didn't respond to a request for comment in time for broadcast. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.